The Lord called to Moses and spoke to him from the tent of meeting. He said, "Speak to the Israelites and say to them, when anyone among you brings an offering to the Lord, bring as your offering an animal from either the herd or the flock. If the offering is a burnt offering from the herd, you are to offer a male without defect. You must present it at the entrance to the tent of meeting so that it will be acceptable to the Lord. You are to lay your hand on the head of the burnt offering, and it will be accepted on your behalf to make atonement for you. You are to slaughter the young bull before the Lord, and then Aaron's sons, the priests, shall bring the blood and splash it against the sides of the altar at the entrance to the tent of meeting. You are to skin the burnt offering and cut it into pieces. The sons of Aaron the priest are to put fire on the altar and arrange wood on the fire. Then Aaron's sons, the priests, shall arrange the pieces, including the head and the fat, on the wood that is burning on the altar. You are to wash the internal organs and the legs with water, and the priest is to burn all of it on the altar. It is a burnt offering, a food offering, an aroma pleasing to the Lord. If the offering is a burnt offering from the flock, from either the sheep or the goats, you are to offer a male without defect. You are to slaughter it at the north side of the altar before the Lord, and Aaron's sons, the priests, shall splash its blood against the sides of the altar. You are to cut it into pieces, and the priests shall arrange them, including the head and the fat, on the wood that is burning on the altar. You are to wash the internal organs and the legs with water, and the priest is to bring all of them and burn them on the altar. It is a burnt offering, a food offering, an aroma pleasing to the Lord. If the offering to the Lord is a burnt offering of birds, you are to offer a dove or a young pigeon. The priest shall bring it to the altar, wring off the head, and burn it on the altar. Its blood shall be drained out on the side of the altar. He is to remove the crop and the feathers and throw them down east of the altar where the ashes are. He shall tear it open by the wings, not dividing it completely, and then the priest shall burn it on the wood that is burning on the altar. It is a burnt offering, a food offering, an aroma pleasing to the Lord. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
Thank you, Nadine. It really is the word of the Lord. But as we start this new series in the book of Leviticus, we might think that we've got a problem. It's one of the least read, one of the least preached books of the Bible, very unfamiliar and even strange material. We got a sense of that in our reading, didn't we? At the very least, it might be a difficult week for vegans. And as we go on through Leviticus, we're going to see a lot of blood and gore, a lot of strange regulations about uncleanness, very specific rules about who you can and can't marry, loads of other strange stuff besides. Someone has said that it is a book of strange laws that we mostly don't keep. A book of strange laws that we mostly don't keep. And for that reason, Leviticus has been described as the graveyard of Bible reading plans. Have you ever tried to read the Bible from the start? If you've ever tried to do that, you'll find probably that Genesis, you can fly through Genesis, some semi-familiar stories, quite a lot of action, into Exodus, the second book of the Bible, again the great story of the rescue from Egypt. You might start to slow down a bit with the second half of Exodus, the detail about how to build the tabernacle. But once you get to Leviticus, it can feel like really hard going. But the problem of Leviticus isn't really a problem with the book itself. The book deals with a problem between us and God. And once we see that problem and see how the answers point us again and again to Jesus, well, that will really start to bring Leviticus alive to us, I think. The real problem of Leviticus is our problem in approaching the holy gods. We need to see where we are in the Bible story. The book of Leviticus starts with the word "and" in Hebrew. It's not translated in our English translations, but literally it would read, "And the Lord called to Moses and spoke to him from the tent of meeting." You see, it follows straight on from the previous book of Exodus. If you remember, when we looked at Exodus last year, God's people, the Israelites, have been rescued from slavery in Egypt. As the Lord said to Pharaoh again and again, "Let my people go, that they might worship me." And the Lord brought them miraculously through the Red Sea into the wilderness. They came to Mount Sinai, where God spoke to them and gave them the 10 Commandments and a whole bunch of other laws, including instructions on how to build a special place, a portable temple, so that God could go with them as they moved through the wilderness and into the promised land. Now, that special place was called the tabernacle, or the tent of meeting. And God would symbolically dwell in the most holy part of the tabernacle, above the Ark of the Covenant, between two gold cherubs, the gatekeepers of heaven. And the book of Exodus finishes on a cliffhanger. It's the climax of the detailed report of the construction and the setting up of the tabernacle in the wilderness at the foot of Mount Sinai. Can you just flip back a page in your Bible to page 101? Page 101, the last parts of the book of Exodus. And we can see there the wonderful climax of the tabernacle building. Exodus chapter 40, verse 34. God himself comes to dwell in the midst of his people. 40 verse 34, "Then the cloud covered the tent of meeting, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle." But at this very moment of climax, we also have a crisis. Because the very next verse says, verse 35, Moses could not enter the tent of meeting, because the cloud had settled on it, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. Do you see the problem? He could not enter the building that was designed for the purpose of meeting with God. The tent of meeting was a place where one of the two parties could not enter. Was the whole tabernacle construction in vain? Maybe you recognize this building. Does anyone know where it is? Elephant and Castle. Yeah. So it's not far from here, 2 or 3 miles away. Elephant and Castle. The very distinctive thing about this building is that it was the first building in the world to be made with wind turbines integral to its structure. And it cost £113.5 million to build, or 113.5 lift projects, as you might put it in St Anne's terms. Have you ever seen these turbines turning? It's unlikely, because almost immediately when this building was finished, they discovered that the turbines caused too much vibration and noise, and the residents of the building were complaining, so they turned them off. They've mothballed them. They're not going to be used. The defining feature of the building didn't work. Can you imagine being one of the architects of that building? Every time you drive through London or walk along the South Bank or whatever, you look at that building and you think, this is embarrassing, isn't it? £113.5 million, a gigantic folly. Is the same true of the tent of meeting? An embarrassing waste of a huge amount of resources. A meeting place where no meeting can take place. Well, the book of Leviticus is the story of how God's people can approach the holy God and live with him in their midst. Leviticus begins with God speaking to Moses and his people from the tent of meeting as they stood awkwardly outside listening. The next book of the Bible, the book of Numbers, begins 1 month later with God speaking to Moses in the tent of meeting. And Leviticus is the story of how God's people can approach the holy God. And isn't it a message that we badly need to hear? A couple of people have said to me recently that they just don't feel worthy of relationship with God. Just don't feel worthy. They don't feel they deserve to call themselves Christians. They don't feel able to pray to God with confidence as their Father. Leviticus is going to show us how we can approach the holy God. For others of us, and to be honest, this is more usually true of me as well, we can take for granted that of course we can approach God. Of course he'll hear us and accept us. It's his job. Leviticus will show us just what a privilege it is, just what it takes for a holy God to dwell with his unholy people. At the end of Leviticus chapter 9, we're going to see Moses and his brother Aaron actually entering the tent of meeting for the first time since God moved in. And the first 9 chapters of the book show us that 2 things are required for that to happen: sacrifices and priests to offer those sacrifices. And today we're looking at the sacrifices. So let's turn now to the role of sacrifices in approaching the holy God. Nadine has read chapter 1 about the most common and the most basic sacrifice that God's people needed to offer, and that is the burnt offering. And we're going to look at that one in a bit of detail, and then much more quickly we'll see the other sorts of sacrifices and what they add to the picture. So Leviticus chapter 1, we're back there now. The Lord called to Moses, and spoke to him from the tent of meeting. He said, "Speak to the Israelites and say to them, when anyone among you brings an offering to the Lord, bring as your offering an animal from either the herd or the flock." The first thing we notice is that the concept of sacrifice is just assumed here. When anyone among you brings an offering to the Lord. It was just assumed that, of course, you would be bringing offerings. The idea of sacrifices to gods is pretty much basic to every ancient culture. It's what Cain and Abel did in Genesis chapter 4, 4th chapter of the whole Bible. The first thing Noah did when he came out of the ark. We've seen it many times already, even this short way into the Bible. The book of Leviticus is not God starting a process of sacrifices. It's about God formalizing and giving specific instructions about how to go about making sacrifices. The principle is already assumed. Of course, people will make sacrifices to their gods. And it's when anyone among you brings an offering. It's very democratic. It's for anyone among God's people, not just for priests, not just for rich people, the privileged. It's for the poor. It's for women as well as men. It's for even foreigners living among them. The rest of the chapter tells us the process of making an offering, whether it's a bull, second paragraph, 3 verses 3 to 9, or a sheep or goat, verses 10 to 13, or a bird, 14 to the end, verse 17, isn't it? The process is similar in each case. Verse 3, if the offering is a burnt offering from the herd, that is a bull, you are to offer a male without defect. You must present it at the entrance to the tent of meeting so that it will be acceptable to the Lord. The sacrifice needed to be perfect, without blemish, the best you could find only for the Lord. Verse 4, you are to lay your hand on the head of the burnt offering, and it will be accepted on your behalf to make atonement for you. This gets to the heart of what the sacrifice was for. The laying on of hands was about identifying yourself with the animal. It's saying, Lord, this animal is me. It represents me. Look on it as me. Accept it on my behalf. And it makes atonement. Key words in the sacrificial system. That word atonement in Hebrew is kippur, which is where we get Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. The English word atonement was invented by William Tyndale, one of the earliest translators of the Bible into English, who was in fact martyred for doing so. He made up the word atonement. There wasn't a word in English when he set about translating the Bible. So he made up the word atonement from at-one-ment. At-one-ment, atonement. It's about the process of making sinful people at one with the holy gods. It carries the sense of cleansing and the sense of ransom, the paying of a price to restore a relationship. And verses 5 to 9 then tell us how the bull is slaughtered. The blood that represents its life is splashed on the altar, and then the whole thing is burnt. The burning is a symbolic way of transferring it from earth to heaven. And as the smoke of the sacrifice rises towards heaven, in verse 9, it is an aroma pleasing to the Lord. The burnt offering is the basic sacrifice. It was offered at the tabernacle every morning and every evening to maintain ongoing relationship with God, so that the holy God could dwell in the midst of his unholy people. The other sacrifices, more briefly, I've listed them on your sheet. The grain offering, chapter 2. Now, this is an offering using the finest flour, usually to make dedication or thanksgiving to the Lord. It often went alongside the burnt offering. Some of it was also burnt as an aroma pleasing to the Lord, and the rest was eaten by the priests. It was seasoned with salt as a sign of faithfulness to the unchanging covenant. Chapter 3, the fellowship offering, or the peace offering, is an expression of relationship with God. What's remarkable about this offering is it's the only one where the worshipper themselves would eat some of it. Some of it was eaten by the priest, some of it was burned up as a pleasing aroma to the Lord, but some of it was eaten by the offerer themselves. You see, this is a fellowship meal with God. Just as we celebrate special occasions with a meal, Jim and Elena, you will have, I expect, a meal after your wedding service to celebrate together with your family and your friends. We do that for birthdays, don't we? We go out for a special meal together. It's a way of expressing celebration and relationship. Well, the fellowship meal is celebrating relationship with God. And if we were doing a whole sermon series through the various different sacrifices, maybe we should do that sometime. We could spend some time thinking about how the fellowship offering points towards our celebratory meal with God today in the Lord's Supper. But we need to press on. In chapters 4 to 6, we come to the sin offering and the guilt offering. Now, these sacrifices were made because of particular sins. The burnt offering, the grain offering, the fellowship offering could be offered for general sins and other times, but the sin offering and the guilt offering you brought when you were aware of a particular sin that you needed to make things right with God. You can see in chapter 4, verse 1, the Lord said to Moses, say to the Israelites, when anyone sins unintentionally and does what is forbidden in any of the Lord's commands, verse 3, if the anointed priest sins, bringing guilt on the people, he must bring to the Lord a young bull without defect as a sin offering for the sin he's committed. Over the page, you'll see the next section, verse 13. If the whole Israelite community sins unintentionally and does what is forbidden in any of the Lord's commands. Verse 22, when a leader sins unintentionally and does what is forbidden. Verse 27, if any member of the community sins, and so on. You get the idea. The sin offering is about purifying a person or the whole community after a particular sin. The guilt offering seems to have been where there's been a particularly serious sin against the Lord, and making it right involves this time a repayment, restitution, as well as a sacrifice to the Lord. And then in chapter 6, verse 8 onwards, through to the end of chapter 7, we're told about the same sacrifices again, but this time, we're told, is teaching the priests how they should go about receiving and offering the sacrifices. And this time, the fellowship offering is mentioned last, giving it particular prominence. After all the other sacrifices that have been made, restoring relationship with God, the holy God can dwell amidst his unholy people, and God's people can sit down to a fellowship meal with their God, celebrating the relationship that he has so graciously allowed. Can you see the privilege of being able to enjoy relationship with God through sacrifice? And also, can you see the sheer commitment involved? I wonder if we can grasp this, the commitment involved. One writer says this, in the overfed West, that's us, by the way, in the overfed West, we can easily fail to realize what was involved in offering an unblemished animal in sacrifice. Meat was a rare luxury in Old Testament times for all but the very rich. Yet even we might blanch if we saw a whole lamb or bull. How much would a whole lamb or a whole bull cost? Hundreds of pounds. Even we might blanch if we saw one go up in smoke as a burnt offering. How much greater pangs must a poor Israelite have felt? And yet these sacrifices went on day in, day out at the tabernacle, and then at the temple in Jerusalem later. Whenever you approached the whole complex, you would have seen the smoke rising. That would be the first thing as you approached from miles away. The smoke rising. You would have smelt, as you got a bit closer, the smoke, but also presumably the rivers of blood around the whole place. You would have heard the cattle and the flocks being herded continually, streaming in to the place of sacrifice. This is a process that needed to be kept up incessantly to allow the holy God to dwell amidst his unholy people. I referred earlier to that building, the Strata SE1 building in Elephant and Castle. But this, the tabernacle, the tent of meeting, if God's people couldn't enter to meet with God there, well, that's not just an embarrassing waste of resources. The very reason for the tabernacle's existence was for the holy God to dwell amidst his holy people. But that reason itself made it a dangerous situation. It's dangerous for a holy God to dwell amidst his holy people. Earlier on, when we went through the second half of Exodus and the tabernacle instructions, we talked about it as like a nuclear power station with God's holy presence at its core. Maybe you can remember the damage to the Fukushima nuclear power station in Japan. There was an earthquake, 2011. And what was the problem that the earthquake caused? It damaged the cooling system. It interrupted the flow of cold water that was needed day in, day out to make that nuclear reactor safe, to prevent it from overheating, from exploding. Without the constant flow of cold water, it quickly became a highly volatile, highly dangerous situation. The constant flow of sacrifices into the tabernacle, the tent of meeting, was like the cooling waters around a nuclear reactor of God's presence on earth. Have we grasped just what is involved in being able to enjoy relationship with our holy God? When we're casual in our approach to God today, when we're complacent and we take him for granted, when we even dare to grumble about the demands he makes on our lives, remember the temple, the tabernacle sacrifices. So where are our sacrifices today? Well, there's a sense in which our whole lives are sacrifices to the Lord. Just as the person bringing the burnt offering to the Lord laid their hands on the animal, this is me being offered to you. So in the New Testament, in Romans chapter 12, for example, we're told, offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. Have you done that? Is that what you're doing day by day? Giving yourself over entirely to the Lord, seeking to glorify him with everything that you do and everything that you are. Your family, your work, your money, your time, your attention, every devotion of your heart, a living sacrifice to the Lord. But something more is still needed. Even the most committed Christian will never be able to do enough. Because fundamental to animal sacrifices was the fact that death is required to pay for sins. That's where I got the title of today's talk. Elsewhere in the book of Romans, it says the penalty of sin is death. And so, yes, we must offer our bodies as living sacrifices, but only after we've accepted the sacrifice in our place of Jesus Christ at the cross. The sacrificial system in the Old Testament would leave the Israelites constantly needing to offer more, just to keep the nuclear reactor of God's presence from overheating in our midst. It's a recipe for anxiety. It's a recipe for keeping you on edge. I don't know if you've ever been to a nuclear power station. I think you probably would never stop being on edge, being that close to a nuclear reactor. But wonderfully, under the new covenant, the gospel of Jesus Christ, we can rest easy. We can be assured, confident in our relationship with our holy God. Would you turn, please, to the New Testament, now to Hebrews chapter 10, page 1204. The page number and reference is on your sheet. I don't think I put it on the screen, I'm afraid, but page 1208. Hebrews chapter 10. We've only got time to look at this very briefly today. If you were here for our Christianity Explored series before Easter, or even just for my Good Friday talk, hopefully you can make the connections here. The home groups are working through Hebrews, and we'll be getting to chapter 10 in the next few weeks. If you're completely new to all of this, please do speak to me about that Christian Basics course that I forgot to mention during the notices, but it's there on the notice sheet. Have a word with me afterwards if this is all completely new to you, because we'd love to go over it just a bit more slowly and clearly. I'm going to read the first part of Hebrews chapter 10. It says, the law, that is, all of these instructions that God gave to Moses, including these instructions for sacrifice, the law is only a shadow of the good things that are coming, not the realities themselves. For this reason, it can never, by the same sacrifices repeated endlessly year after year, make perfect those who draw near to worship. Otherwise, would they not have stopped being offered? For the worshippers would have been cleansed once for all and would no longer have felt guilty for their sins. But those sacrifices are an annual reminder of sins. It is impossible for the blood of bulls and goats to take away sins. Therefore, verse 5, when Christ came into the world, he said, sacrifice and offering you did not desire, but a body you prepared for me. With burnt offerings and sin offerings you were not pleased. Then I said, here I am. It is written about me in the scroll. I have come to do your will, my God. The Old Testament law of Moses, the whole sacrificial system that was contained within it, was only ever a temporary holding operation and a gigantic visual aid, a shadow pointing ahead to the reality which is the cross of Jesus Christ. Let me put it like this. Sometimes people ask, when they come into St. Anne's as a visitor, sometimes they'll say, where's your altar? And if I'm feeling cheeky, I'll say, we don't have an altar because we don't make animal sacrifices. An altar is a place that you offer sacrifices. But our sacrifice is the one that we're told about in the Bible in front of you, and that's illustrated in the window here. That was the sacrifice that ended all sacrifices. One perfect man to do what thousands of bulls and goats and everything else could never do. To provide all the atonement that we could need once for all. We don't need an altar today. We don't continue to make sacrifices of atonement. Each of the various elements of the sacrificial system, the different sacrifices that we find in chapters 1 to 7, they are designed to teach us something about Jesus. I borrowed this picture from someone else. I don't know if you can read it. I'll read it to you in a second. But the idea is those coloured circles are the different sorts of sacrifices and the different things represented by the details around the sacrifice. But together they make up one picture that shows us the cross of Jesus Christ. And they together teach us that Jesus is perfect, like the lamb without blemish, the bull that's the best of the herd. They teach us that Jesus died in my place as the worshipper laid their hands on the animal. This is me. It represents me. Jesus' blood takes away my guilt as the blood was splashed on the sides of the altar. Jesus' obedience to death is a fragrant offering, an aroma pleasing to the Lord. Out of Jesus' death comes blessing, as Israelites were blessed after the sacrifices had been made. Jesus is mine. Jesus' death brings friendship with God, the peace offering, the fellowship offering, the meal with God. And so the writer to the Hebrews applies the message of the cross to show the confidence that we can have as Christians today before our holy gods. And with this we'll close, but I hope you carry on chewing it over as we meet for tea and coffee later on and sit down for lunch, and as you go home and look back over your notes and reflect on these things. Hebrews chapter 10, verse 19 now. Therefore, brothers and sisters, since we have confidence to enter the most holy place by the blood of Jesus, by a new and living way opened for us through the curtain that is his body, and since we have a great priest over the house of God, let us do what? Let us draw near to God with a sincere heart and with the full assurance that faith brings, having our hearts sprinkled to cleanse us from a guilty conscience, and having our bodies washed with pure water. Let us hold unswervingly to the hope we profess, for he who promised is faithful. And let us consider how we may spur one another on towards love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching. Our Father God, we thank you and praise you that you have made one sacrifice to bring atonement, cleansing, ransom, to make us right with you, for you to dwell with us and among us and in us. Thank you and praise you that we can enjoy fellowship with you. We ask, our Father God, that as we meditate on the sacrifices that seem so strange to us, this whole system from the Old Testament, we pray, our Father, that you will bring home to us the privilege of relationship with you. We ask, Father, that as we accept your sacrifice of your beloved Son, Jesus Christ, so we will truly desire to respond by giving our whole lives to glorify you now and forever. Amen.